Hi, welcome. It's episode 123 of Grow Yourself Up. And today I'm joined by my guest, Kate Merrick. So let me tell you a bit about Kate, and then I'll tell you a bit about what the episode's about. So Kate is a mother, an embodied gestalt psychotherapist, transformational coach, and a home herbalist, and she's dedicated to guiding women on their journeys of healing and transformation. Kate specialises in the holistic treatment of childhood developmental trauma, ancestral trauma, and post-traumatic growth, empowering women to reclaim their inner authority, their innate wisdom, their cyclical rhythm, and to deepen into loving, compassionate relationships with themselves. As well as working in one-to-one practice, Kate also runs women's circles that center around psychological and spiritual growth work. In addition, she now runs Rushmead Farm, her garden cauldron, making organic therapeutic products from her Somerset herb garden, natural elixirs that support our minds, bodies, and spirits. And you can connect with Kate on Instagram at The Embodied Woman and Rushmead Farm. And she's got a website, and all of those details are in the show notes. So just click through to go and see those. So Kate and I had a wonderful conversation about her path to motherhood and how her daughter, who was born at 29 weeks, so very premature, what kind of that ignited in her and her journey through the medical system and navigating being in NICU for such a long time, and how she really advocated and used her power in that place, and also how complicated and difficult that is because of the structures that are in place, and all the kind of complexity around that. I met Kate on Instagram, and we share a lot of the same ideals, and it was really a kind of a joyful and rich conversation, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. And her wisdom around the ancestral healing and what comes to us from our ancestors is so important. I especially liked what she said about often she talked about basically the positives that come from our ancestors, and how I want you to really listen to her story about her garden and the kind of the path she's now going down, and how that links to her own healing or her ancestral line, and kind of claiming what's come down to her through her lineage. And there's so much richness in this and so much wisdom. So I hope you really get a lot from it. And let's dive in. I'm really delighted to have you. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Tell us a bit about your path to motherhood.
So I was very ambivalent about having children. I didn't feel any strong maternal instinct. I didn't feel particularly kind of connected towards babies or children. I just thought I was not very maternal. And so I just didn't know really how to navigate that. And I did some of the kind of pros and cons lists, I sort of approached it like I was going shopping. And my husband was also really ambivalent as well. And this was probably in my early 30s, and I'd qualified as a psychotherapist, and I was working, and we were talking about it, and we sort of were like, well, we don't really know, but we'll give it a try. We'll try and we'll see. And so we did try for about a year, and we tried very diligently. I'm an Aries, so, when I do something, I really do it. And nothing happened. I didn't conceive. And then I had to have an operation on my eye because I had a lazy eye. And so, for the duration while you're waiting to have an operation, and for the operation, you can't be pregnant. So I had to stop trying and take a break. And so that sort of went on for about a year. So a year passed. And then me and Ben, my husband, came back together, and we were like, okay, shall we start trying again? And we were both a bit like, the moment had sort of passed, and we'd sort of gone off the idea, and we had been thinking about our future, and we didn't really see children as part of it. And so we decided not to try, but we'll just see how we go. We'll just see what happens. And so that's what we did. And we bought cats. We got rescue cats, and they became part of our family, and we were like, who needs kids when you've got cats? And that was our family. And we were like really sort of accepting that this was going to be us now. And there was this growing movement online at the time around being a child-free woman that I got really into, and I really got into the politics of it and the kind of, the cultural constraints for women around the role of motherhood. And so it's kind of like flying the flag a little bit. And then I fell pregnant when I was 40. So some years had passed and it was completely unplanned, completely unexpected. And
And so that's a massive shift, especially if you've embraced child-free by choice, and then suddenly you were going to have a child. Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge shift. And but what was interesting for me was that I found out I was pregnant through a dream.
Wow.
And I was on a spiritual retreat at the time for about 7 days, and it was right at the beginning of the retreat. And I dreamt that I was running down the road and I was busy and running and doing my thing. And I passed by 2 babies that had been abandoned on the roadside. And I carried on running and I was like, oh shit, I really better go back and check on these babies. And it was like really inconvenient. And I went back and I saw these 2 babies in a box, and I picked one of them up. One of them kind of turned into a bigger child and grew up in front of me. And the other one I picked up and she was really ill. And she was so withered and drawn and kind of aged. And I was really connecting to this baby and saying to her, you're so beautiful. Don't ever forget how beautiful you are. And I was bonding with her. And then I thought, oh, I better call the police. I better call someone to take the babies and have them somewhere safe. And so I called the police and they were saying, okay, so where are you? And I was looking down the road and I was like, I don't know, I can't find a street name anywhere. And so this guy walks past and I say, oh, where am I? And he's like mysterious and wise. And he says, oh, no one's ever worked out the name of this place before.
Wow.
And I woke up and I was like, oh shit, I'm pregnant. I just
Wow.
knew
What a
it.
message. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was how I found out.
Wow. That's incredible that you had sort of, well, that you predicted it in your psyche. I mean, you obviously knew. You did know.
Yeah. And then something else happened. It just so happened that next morning after my dream, I had a session with my spiritual teacher. And so I went in and sat with her and I got into this lovely kind of centered, grounded, meditative state. And I had a very spontaneous vision. And in this vision, an elder African ancestor appeared to me, a man. And my mother's lineage, African Jamaican, and they were taken from Africa and they were enslaved on plantations in Jamaica for hundreds and hundreds of years. So he was on that side of my family. And we were sat around a fire in this vision, and he said to me, you're scared. And he handed me a box, a little black box, and I opened the box, and in it was this scroll, and it was very old parchment paper with like calligraphy writing.
Yeah.
And I opened the scroll, and it was just names and names, hundreds and thousands of names, all written in a list. And he said to me, these are the names of all of your ancestors, all of the babies and all of the children that were killed, that died, that were bought and sold.
Oh, my word.
And he said, this is why you're afraid. And this is not your fear to carry anymore. And he took the box from me and the scroll and he threw it in the fire. And there was this huge fire and this huge celebration.
That's incredible. I mean, that's like, because of course you would have had fear, like especially in your body from that. Wow.
Yeah. And
Did you know, can I ask you, did you know much of your history before that? Like, had you really talked a lot to your mum and have you visited where they came from in Africa or?
I'd been on a really long journey. So this was now 2017. I guess it was not a really long journey. It started in 2012, where I started to, again, it came to me through a dream. And I started to look into my ancestors. I did my DNA test. I started to get really into my genealogy. And then I met some cousins that from Jamaica that now lived in America that I had not known about or met before. And through them, because they'd done lots of research prior to us meeting, so they had loads of information, whereas my family, my immediate family, had no information whatsoever. You know, my grandparents left Jamaica and they did what many migrants do. They just put their blinkers on, they put their heads down, and they worked. And they did not talk about where they had come from or who they'd come from or who our family were. So we grew up as kids like knowing nothing. We just knew they were Jamaican and that was it. So we had very little information. But my aunt had started the journey of research because she had written a book about our family. So she had some information and she sort of passed the baton on to me and I continued it. So when I met these cousins, the blood connection was so powerful.
Yeah.
And it culminated in us doing lots of research together, really being held in the process because information just started opening up very readily to us. And then we were able to trace right back to the plantation and who the family members were, their roles on the plantation. And it culminated with me taking my grandmother's ashes back to Jamaica on pilgrimage. And we all went to the plantation together.
Wow. God, that must have been so unbelievable. And so,
Yeah,
I mean,
it was life changing. It completely changed my life because, well, in so many ways. But I had so much, I had so much angst about my identity and my racial identity because I had grown up very close to my Jamaican family in London, who were Black. And so I felt very aligned with our British Jamaican culture. And I grew up in Tottenham as well, which was a very Caribbean neighborhood at the time, an African neighborhood. So I felt really aligned with my heritage. And at the same time, I looked white. So it caused such a conflict for me in not knowing where I belonged.
yeah, where you fit in.
Where I fit in, it just created so much internal angst. And I had nowhere to really go to ask or to talk about it because there was so much trauma in my family, particularly around race, that I just, there was not the support there for me to really inquire and be held. So when I went to Jamaica, it just changed everything because I arrived on the land and I felt like I was home. And people were coming up to me in the village that my grandmother had grown up in, and they were calling me by my great-grandfather's name because I looked so much like him.
Wow.
It's just that, yeah.
What a calling home. Like, and how much it's interesting that it's Jamaica that you feel so connected to, as in not Africa.
Yeah, well, because my ancestors would have been taken from Africa, I'd say in the 1600s, around then, and taken to Jamaica. So that would have been my most recent ancestry,
Yeah.
was in Jamaica for however many hundreds of years. And then it would have been Africa. But because, like, we're so disconnected from our African lineage, that's so typical of people in the diaspora, that we lose connection with that ancestral thread when it's been broken, when there have been people have been moved on, migrated, misplaced,
Dehumanized.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So there is this disconnection and fragmentation that happens through the line of the family as well,
Yes.
So that really, was my experience, and I felt that fragmentation and disconnection very acutely, but it changed when I went to Jamaica, because I felt really for the first time, oh my God, I feel a sense of belonging here. Yeah.
And so going back to your spiritual experience where the all ancestors' names were burnt in the fire, that must have been so powerful and kind of setting you on a path back of more freedom, because of course you would have had so much fear about that otherwise.
Yeah, it did. I mean, after that, in that moment, I felt, the first thing was I felt completely connected to this soul that had entered my body. I felt like I'm doing this. I'm having this baby. So there was this certainty in me. And sorry, Cath, I forgot your question.
So I was just saying, I wanted to check in with you if you wanted to tell us more about like your lineage. And then I was wondering if I should bring you back to talking about, because I interrupted you telling us about I interrupted us telling about your spiritual experience because I was so touched and kind of amazed by that, and kind of interested in how wise your ancestors are to come and give you that experience in the form of that spiritual experience to help you because of I just think about what would have been held in your system from all those experiences and how that wouldn't have helped in pregnancy. So I interrupted you. So then I wanted to know if you wanted to go back to that. That's why.
Yeah, I'll go back to that. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you. Yeah, so I felt this real certainty then, and I felt a bond immediately. And I don't know if I would have felt that otherwise if I had just sort of had a late period and did a pregnancy test. There was something in the experience of the dream and the vision that really grounded me into this deep spiritual experience. And I hadn't, I was still on retreat at the time, so I had a week to really land and digest what was happening. And then I went home and had to tell my husband that I was having a baby. Which was a process in and of itself, because he was still very firmly in, we're not having kids, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be our life now. So that was a journey. But yeah, then at 29 weeks, I was rushed into the labour ward during a routine midwife appointment because I had severe preeclampsia. And my daughter was delivered the next day.
What a shock that must have been.
Yeah, it was a real shock. It was so surreal, Cath. It was so surreal. I mean, from somebody who was not into kids, like kids and babies were not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
To being immersed in the world of neonatal intensive care. I mean, it was so surreal and so nuts. And I had to I just had to get on board with it. You just have to adapt. Every moment you're adapting to a new situation, every moment, more news, constantly adapting. And so I very quickly went into survival mode then.
Not surprising. I mean, had you known you had preeclampsia, or that was a shock as well that you found under 29 weeks?
Yeah, I didn't know I had preeclampsia. So it was, my midwife saw me, and I just thought I was pregnant. I was like, I feel pregnant. That's how I feel. So she did all my checks and my protein and my blood pressure, and then she looked at my very swollen body and was like, okay, we need to take you to the labour ward. So that was a shock as well. And my organs were shutting down. I was in a really bad way, which is why they had to deliver her so quickly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's real danger for you in that, as the mother, I mean.
Yeah, there is real. It was hairy, it was really hairy.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because me and my midwife actually got the dates wrong. I was not due to meet her for another week and a half. So thank God that I saw her when I did.
Yeah.
Because they were able to intervene really quickly. And, that's the only way you can start to recover, right? Is to deliver the placenta and the baby.
Yes. Wow. And that's kind of then going into the medical system, because neonatal or early birth is very medicalized, and being in NICU for many, many months. How did that all go?
It was challenging. It was really a challenge. I felt she was in there for 99 days. And in that time, she had 2 operations and also had sepsis in between her operations. So it was really touch and go. And I didn't know anything about babies. I didn't know anything. I had no idea that this whole world existed. I didn't know that a baby could survive at 29 weeks. I certainly did not know a baby could survive at 29 weeks and have an operation. Like, I just had no idea. So it was such a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Being in there. And
blindsiding. I mean, that must have really, in terms of like your whole life just suddenly went upside down like that.
Yeah, totally upside down.
Mm.
Absolutely. My world became so small. I mean, she was transferred to another hospital after a couple of days. And so I discharged myself from hospital, but I was very unwell still. So I had this weird world. My world became really small, and it was just me. I mean, my husband was also going to the hospital, but generally it was me going to the hospital every morning, staying there all day, having to leave when the night staff came and swapped over, going home, trying to recuperate myself and having to inject myself because I was on blood thinners and all sorts, had blood clots, going back the next day, so doing that for 99 days. And in that time, when I was talking about the constantly having to keep adapting, you go in and you never know what you're going to be faced with. You never know what the situation is. You never know what the new problem is that's been discovered, what the new intervention is. And you go in and there's all the doctors around her incubator and you think, oh my God, what's happened now?
Yeah.
And so it's just constantly having to navigate that. And that would happen multiple times every day. And also I think, as a therapist, and I specialise in developmental trauma, like just knowing what a poor little system was experiencing and going through, and having those nights, every night in the ward with a nurse, but the nurse would have 6 babies in her care.
Yeah.
So I knew that she was going to be on her own for a lot of that time. And one of the nurses, when I came in once in the morning, she said, "Oh, you're Eliza's mum. Oh my God, that baby can scream."
Oh,
And
God.
I thought, "Oh, please
Oh,
don't. I don't want to know that. I just don't want to know that she's been left screaming all night."
yeah.
So
God, that's a big burden. I just really want to acknowledge that that's such a big burden for you because there's nothing you could have done.
yeah,
She had to stay there for her life
yeah,
to live.
yeah. There's nothing that you can do, um, or that I could have done. Um,
But with your knowledge, it's sort of almost doubly hard, I think.
I think so. I mean, what was great is that there was a psychologist there on the ward, and so I would hang out with him and talk to him, and amazingly, I had one of my somatic experiencing teachers on speed dial. And she was amazing. And one thing she said to me, which really helped me to just really ground and center, was, "Kate, not all trauma has to be traumatizing."
Yeah,
And I went, "Okay, thanks. Okay."
yeah,
Like there was so much that I could do in the time that I was there with her.
yeah,
Um, so that was my focus for those 99 days. But I mean, it was hard, of course, because it's a hard situation and it's a really difficult environment. But one of the things that was really hard for me was in terms of what it activated in my own history,
yeah.
both personal and ancestral, around having no agency.
Mhm.
Like I had no authority as a mother there. I had no sovereignty. I had really no voice.
Mhm.
Um, and it was really a lot of fear came up for me. I had a lot of terror around challenging authority.
The medical. So tell us more about that. Tell us how is it that the medical staff are very like just tell us, do they completely run it without any ideas of what you might think would be good for her?
Yeah, in a nutshell, exactly. Because you're just the mum, you know, and they're the medical staff and they know what works, what doesn't work, what helps, what's going on with her system. There's no honoring of mother's intuition or even the wisdom that we bring with us as human beings, right, into that situation. There was nothing. There was no acknowledgement, or kind of, or yeah, honoring really of that. And so I really struggled because there were many interventions that I thought were really unnecessary. They were the kind of just in case interventions, which were happening far too often.
Mhm.
Um, I would constantly be asking them if I could bring things in, can she have probiotics because she's had so many courses of antibiotics. No, it's not proven that probiotics work. I would bring in um, very gentle herbal remedies for her skin. And I was told that they were dangerous.
Oh
You
wow.
know, s- Things like that. That was my experience. And and as much as they were really caring for her and saving her life, there were also things that I think were unnecessary and that were really impeding her body's capacity to heal itself.
Yes. And stripping you um of your agency, but also of the kind of right to have input.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I felt that strongly actually in the hospital and um, kind of in a kind of collective experience, really, not just in my experience, but I think there can be a real kind of um, violation of mother's dignity in this system. Um, and so, that was my experience. And
And the baby's dignity as well, do you think?
oh, Yeah, I think so. I think so. The baby's dignity as well. It's just so much for them to contend with, and they're so little. I mean, my daughter was the 2 pounds, she's tiny, and the amount of just the amount of prodding and needles and constant X-rays and lumbar punctures and blood tests. I mean, it was just endless. And when she left hospital, she had a nervous tick, and she did this. She, like her whole body would twist, and I noticed that she was twisting away from the side that the doctors and nurses would come.
Yeah.
To try and do something to get away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
God, that tells you so much. I mean, so I'm sure that, and did they, like the pricking of the little foot, I'm sure she always moved her foot away as well.
yeah, and the cannulas, and then there's no veins left because they've all been oh God, yeah, it was just endless.
And Kate, because you said this really activated your own personal history and your ancestral history. Tell us more about that.
So it was like a mirror, really, because in childhood, me and my sisters, we didn't have a voice, or the parents and the adults were the authority. It wasn't quite children should be seen and not heard. It wasn't quite that generation, but it was the residue of that generation. So it felt really familiar in that sense, and I felt scared. I felt really afraid to stand up, to be visible, to speak out, to challenge. And I felt like, oh, I'm going to be put on some list and punished, right, if I do that. And that was really also the ancestral piece, because it was so big, this terror. And I felt this thread in me from all of the women back through my ancestral lines that didn't have any agency, didn't have any right to speak or move from their authority or their intuition as mothers to protect their kids. And I'm not, the two situations are incomparable. I'm not comparing my situation at all to that of my enslaved ancestors, but this is how intergenerational trauma shows up, right? It's like, in the environment, if there is any residue of similarity or familiarity, then that ancestral cellular memory goes ping, it switches on, right? It's awake. And so
And when you say a list, added to a list and punished, is there Jewish ancestry as well? That you've said, like somehow the list.
There is, yeah. There's Jewish Jamaican ancestry. Yeah. That's on my maternal grandfather's side, Jewish Jamaican ancestry. So I don't know much about the Jewish side. We haven't been able to get there because there were children, out of wedlock. But what really struck me was the feeling and the sense of, if I stand out, if I cause trouble, if I challenge authority, then I'm going to be punished. My baby will be taken, might be sold. That was the sense that I had, or killed, or something awful was going to happen.
Yeah. And how did you kind of alchemize that because in those 99 days, that was the time to kind of move through that and sort of try and shift it. Were you able to shift some of it, or really tend to yourself?
Yeah, I was. So I had a very, my spiritual practice in part is my connection with my ancestors. So I really called upon them all of the time to support me, to protect me, to guide me, to help me heal whatever was being called to heal in myself, but also for all those that had gone before.
Yeah.
And so they were very present in holding me through this. And so I had times when I was very clear, I could see very clearly what was happening, what was playing out. And the healing work for me was in growing the muscle really to move through this fear with absolute love and compassion for myself.
Yeah.
Whilst at the same time, like, building the courage to stand in my own authority and find my own voice as a mother with agency in the face of authority. Like, that was the healing journey.
Yeah.
So I felt very held through that process. And sometimes I was hijacked by the terror, but other times I had more clarity so that I could really support myself and ground and center and do all the good things that I needed to do to move through it.
Yeah. And I love the kind of acknowledgement of that process, because whenever we're on a journey of trying to, I guess you're describing widening your window of tolerance to sit with your discomfort and then still being courageous, we do get hijacked by the terror. And our own discomfort kind of cuts us down, so we can't take action. So thank you for speaking to, we don't just do that and suddenly we're all courageous and changing the way we are.
Absolutely not. I'll give you an example, actually, Cath.
That would be brilliant.
So we've been in hospital for 90 days at this point, and a nurse very casually came up to me and handed me a letter and said, "Oh, by the way, Mummy, we've referred you on to social services. So here's the letter just to confirm and tell you about it."
What? And also calling you Mummy. I would want to smack them.
Cath, that's your name. Your Mummy. Your Mummy. Mummy. All the time. You're nameless, you're just Mummy. Oh my God. So she handed me this letter and she said this to me, and I lost my shit. I was
surprised.
I completely lost my shit. I was hysterical. I was hyperventilating. I was so terrified and enraged all at once that people thought that Eliza had died because of my reaction. People were coming up to me going, "Oh my God, what's happened? What's happened?" I'm like, they fucking referred me to social services. And they're like, "Yeah, they've referred all of us. That's what happens at 90 days. But that was an example, right? It's the policy, it's the procedure.
Why?
It's something about when your baby is being looked after by the state or has another guardian or something like that, social services have to get involved. I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but it really triggered me.
Not surprisingly. I mean, there's that thing about being added to the list and authority figure taking over.
Exactly.
I would find that deeply triggering as well.
Exactly. So it was right there, and I was absolutely hysterical. But other mums didn't find it triggering. Other mums took it in their stride as just part of the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very different reaction. So I think that's, it's an example, right, of how trauma can really, really.
Well, it speaks to your and also your ancestry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's life and death, it feels like life and death in the moment.
Because it is.
Yeah.
For your ancestors.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell us then, because we talked a little bit before about what you wanted to focus on, because it seems like what you just said about standing in your agency then has you've mapped that onto your kind of career trajectory in terms of really talking back to power and really taking back all your own power and connecting to your ancestors in terms of the way you work now and support your daughter. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I do a lot of, in my practice with women, I tend to work kind of across 3 levels of personal trauma, cultural trauma, and ancestral trauma. And those 3 are so interwoven. And so when I work with women, that's always present in the field, and so that's just become part of how I work in my therapeutic practice. And then with my daughter, what was really amazing was that once I was able to really alchemize the fear, which is, for me, such a key part of ancestral healing work, is when we can alchemize the fear, then the gold, then it's like I was able to receive all of the amazing gifts that are also inherent in me that have been passed down from my ancestors. So that's like this deep well of wisdom and strength and resilience and creativity. I mean, so many amazing qualities, but
Yeah.
what I really was attuned to when we came out of hospital was I wanted to support Eliza's health in the most natural, organic, close to the earth way as I could. And that felt like an ancestral legacy,
Yes.
because it's only the last couple of generations really that we've become so disconnected from the land and the medicine that's available to us. So all of our ancestors would have been so attuned to the land. They would have spoken the language of the land. They would have known instinctively, passed down through oral tradition, what healed, what didn't. So all of that information is in us. And I think for me, it was really part of that ancestral memory that also woke up in me. And so
And I love that. I wanted to say something. I love that because I think we can get so fixated. I know I can do this on the bad stuff that's been passed down and the fear and the terrible, like the terror and the shame, and really acknowledging the great body of wisdom and what you said about resilience and creativity, to really be able to kind of tap into that and notice that. That's just so wonderful. And how did you do that practically before you moved to where you've got your own like medicine garden? How did you actually do that on a
practical, so this is what I did. So I was like, I couldn't wait for them to discharge her from hospital. I couldn't wait because I knew that once she was discharged, her body could really start healing.
Yeah.
And so I got a whole team of health practitioners in line, ready to go when she came out. And I saw a course. I was very drawn to herbal medicine at this point. And I saw a course that was in my local community centre. Amazing. It was in herbal medicine, for herbal first aid medicine for babies and children.
Wow.
I know. And so I went along with babe in arms, and I went to every class and I learned so much there. And we foraged and we made medicines, and I took away so much information that I was able to just make all our medicines at home, all our body products, and support Eliza with plant medicine, as well as all the other lovely medicines that we had available to us. And so that's what
It's incredible.
I started to do. Yeah. And the difference, I think, well, one of the differences was that I had this team in place, but I was part of the team, like
Yes.
I could really bring my own wisdom and knowledge to support her health and her healing. And that, I think, is really important as a
Really important.
mother, that we can take back that power, right? And to really inhabit our own authority. So that's what happened. And I was in London at the time, and I would go foraging, and I'd buy dried herbs, and I'd make all of our stuff at home.
Like, what did you make? Because I find this absolutely fascinating. I love this sort of stuff, but I have never done a herbal qualification. My husband often tries to make things. Well, he makes a lot of we've made body cream and we've made cream, and we try and make clothes washing stuff, but not really stuff for our body. But he thinks that we can make everything with white vinegar. I mean, you can basically clean everything with white vinegar.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in making cream for my own body, moisturizer.
I'll tell you, I'll send you some recipes. What was amazing is that when I was pregnant, I did a homeopathy course as well. And so I had a homeopath, and I had the first aid kit for the homeopathy for kids and children, babies and children. And so I had everything there that I needed, and Eliza responded and does respond so incredibly well to homeopathy. So we never needed cowpaw until she was much older and like 4 or something, and had really bad earache, and she was in a lot of pain. But up until that, herbs and homeopathy had been more than sufficient, you know?
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. So I made all kinds of things, cough medicines. I make the kind of immune boosting medicines like elderflower and elderberry syrup, um, thyme, sage, honey medicines for the chest. And um, my first thing I made was a plantain um, leaf balm for nappy rash. And then it just kept growing and growing. So
That's incredible.
yes, it's really simple. It's really simple. And I felt that I was really drawing on bodies of knowledge, you know, like
Yeah.
generations and generations. Because my grandmother, um, still, she was very holistic and very natural in how she attended to her health. And, you know, she was like, just drink apple cider vinegar every day, you know, and she had comfrey in her garden that she would use. And so I had this little glimmer of it with her, but I had stories. I was told stories about how her mother would tend to the children in the family and in the neighborhood by using herbs and plants. And, you know, her garden was her pharmacy. And that would have been really just so normal and common for all of our ancestors.
Yes.
So I felt like I was drawing on this well of knowledge and wisdom. And then I got to a point in London where I couldn't be there anymore. I felt I couldn't be there anymore. And this went on for years, actually, because my husband was very rooted in London. And I was feeling increasingly suffocated and hemmed in. And I wanted to be out in the wilds. Like I wanted to see the sky. That was the thing that I kept feeling, was like, I just want to see the sky. And I could never see the sky in London because there's so many buildings in the way, you know, and I'd spend an hour and a half to drive out to Richmond Park to go and see the sky. And then I'd still hear sirens, and then I'd have an hour and a half back in traffic.
And airplanes. Yeah.
And airplanes, yeah. It's like, it's not quite what I want, you know? And so it got to a point now where Eliza was about 4, she must have been 4. And I was like, I've got to go. I can't stay here anymore. I felt like I was going to die if I stayed. It sounds very dramatic, but I think that
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah.
parts of me would have died off had I stayed.
And how did you negotiate that with the person who was very wedded to London? Your husband, I mean.
I came home one day. Oh, this is another story, Cath.
That's okay.
So I was at East Acton Tube Station. If you know East Acton Tube Station, it's really miserable. Like it's horrible. It's in on a dual carriageway. Oh my God, it's like I could not bear the walk from the tube station to our house. That's where we were living at the time. Grey, like so much noise, so much traffic, so much smog. And I came out of the station, and I was really missing my dad. And I had told you before, my dad had passed away. And I was like, oh, Dad, I wish you were here. You know, you really know what to say to me right now. And I was crying, and I heard a voice say, just look down on the ground. And I looked down on the ground, and I've got it with me. So I'm going to show you, because I always have it next to me. And I found this little tile.
Oh,
And
it looks like a house in it.
it's a little country house.
Yeah.
And I heard my dad say, don't give up your dream of your country cottage.
Oh, my word.
So I took that tile and I ran home, and I said to my husband, I have to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what's happened. I have to go. And he heard me. He really heard me.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, if we have to go, we have to go.
Wow, how incredible.
And Cath, life then took over. It unfolded so effortlessly. Our move, selling our house, buying a new house, finding our house. And then we arrived in Somerset in March 23. Yeah, so nearly 2 years ago now.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
And now, I love that story. I find that very touching. And now, are you like your great grandmother now, or like your granny that you've got comfy in your garden? Because I've seen on Instagram, I think you've got a like a medicine, haven't you got a labyrinth that you've planted where you go like a spiral walk?
No, that's a medicine garden in Wales that a friend of mine has grown, but I may well do in the future. But when we came here, we had this tiny little garden in Acton, like a little postage stamp size, and I was never interested in gardening at all. And when we moved here, we've got a really big garden here, like so blessed. We've got this big garden. And I said, well, I'll the garden. And my husband, Ben, said, you are never going to be a gardener. You are just not going to get in the garden. I know you. There's no way. And he said that because any spare time that I had prior to this, I would be writing. So I'd be at my desk in my office, scribbling away, writing. So I totally get, why he said that. But then something changed when I got here. Again, it was like that cellular memory woke up. It
got activated, yeah.
It got activated. It could get activated so much in London, but here, like just wide apart, and it has changed everything for me because now all my focus and attention is in the garden, and it's on growing herbs, and it's cultivating a beautiful medicine garden and making even more products and learning even more about the medicine that's available here and working with it and deepening into relationship with it as well, into relationship with the natural world. And this for me is so key because how can I say this? It's like I think often in the work of working with ancestors and kind of connecting to our ancestry, people feel like they have to go to the land of their ancestors. And whilst that can be incredibly healing, I don't think it has to just be that way. I did have that experience in Jamaica and it's incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. But what I found coming to Somerset, where I have no ancestral connection at all here that I know of at all, but it's the land, it's in connecting to the land that opens the memory.
Yeah.
Because our ancestors were so symbiotically interconnected to the land and the elements. And when we are able to drop into that, then all that beautiful ancestral memory and wisdom and knowledge and skill and resilience and creativity is available to us. That has been my experience. And so I feel that when I was in London, it was like, it was true, I had to leave because that wild primal part of me wanted to really expand. It had to expand.
Yeah. And it couldn't expand in East Acton. Yeah.
It could not have expanded there, So this has been part of my own healing and evolution, my growth. I had to grow out of that and come somewhere where there is space and I can see the sky and I can connect to all the elements and the animals and the kind of wild, the more wild parts of nature. And then they allow me to really connect to those wild parts of myself. So
yeah,
it feels really also timely as I am in my perimenopause as well.
Yeah.
Coming into this experience of womanhood feels really timely and important.
Yeah. And I love what you said about connecting to your wild parts, because that'll help you be in your agency, in all the ways
Yeah.
to really kind of stand in that power. And do you sell your products and your creams and things like that? Or do you just sell?
I'm just about to. I haven't until now. It's been entirely for friends and family and gifts for the teachers. But now I am, at the turn of this new year, I woke up with a very clear, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing now. So yeah, so I'm creating my new business. Yeah. Selling, making medicine from the land with the herbs here and the plants, and all organic and natural and really beautifully nourishing and therapeutic.
Oh, sounds so wonderful, Kate. Um, I'm just conscious of the time. Is there anything else that you think you wanted to share with us?
You know what? I'd love to share something from a book, if I may.
Of course you can.
There's this really beautiful book, I've talked about it on Instagram, called Amphibious Soul, and Finding the Wild in the Tame World by Craig Foster. And I just wanted to read just like a little excerpt from it that I think really kind of ties into what I've been saying today. The primal parts of my mind, things like sensing danger, were shaped by my animal ancestors. Other parts were formed by ancient hominids. When I cook my food over a fire, that part of my mind is drawing on my Homo erectus ancestors from 500,000 years ago. When I make more sophisticated tools, my hands are being guided by my Homo sapien ancestors from 100,000 years ago. The whole universe is inside of us, and we are inside of it. I feel deeply connected to all living creatures, animals, plants, and the earth, and elements that sustain us. We are all made of the same substance. And that's why, in moments of grace, I feel so woven in. I feel frog, I feel dragonfly, and if I stretch my mind, I even feel rock. I'm a frog, rock, spider, dragonfly. I am a galaxy, and so are you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love those words. Amphibious Soul is the book. This has been so grounding and lovely for me, as we sit here today, like being in connection with you. Tell us, how can people work with you? Where can they find you?
So I have a website, which is katemerrickpsychotherapy.co.uk. So I am working in one-to-one practice at the moment, and I work with women, and that's how people can find me. Oh, and I have an Instagram account, which is
The Embodied Woman.
the embodied woman, embodied woman.
And that'll be in the show notes. I mean, this will all be in the show notes.
Oh, right, fine, okay, yeah. So that's how people can find out more about me and how I work and contact me.
And I think that you have groups that you run in.
Yeah. I've actually paused all of my women's circles and courses for the moment whilst I build my new herbal apothecary. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I'm doing that, and I'm in my one-to-one practice, and that's what I'm doing for now.
Okay. Kate, this has been really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this like beautiful wisdom, and the points you made around how we've all got ancestral wisdom we can connect to. I think that's so comforting, especially when we're healing from trauma, that we can look at the whole legacy of what comes to us. And often that only comes towards the end of a trauma healing journey, because in the beginning we're so covered in the pain, basically. And so I guess for the listeners, I want to say, hold on for like looking at what the creativity and the beauty and the goodness is and the resilience that comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yes, Cath, that's so true. Yes, there are many layers, right, to work through, like
Yeah.
layers of an onion, working through those, and then once we can kind of peel away and do that work of integration and healing, and then there's all these great depths that are available to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes time sometimes. So if you're at the beginning and you don't think there's any resilience or creativity in your lineage, just hold on.
Yeah, just absolutely. It can be, I think, a lifetime's work as well, But as well, We are often really disconnected from our lineages and from our ancestors because information is lost and we often don't know anything about our ancestors. And we don't necessarily need to, but we can have a sense of them. Talking about kind of the gifts and the creativity, as a starting point, when people feel that kind of fragmentation, maybe just to sense into some benevolent ancestral energy that you want to call in for yourself, that can really hold you and support you and offer you the love and compassion and guidance that you want and are longing for. We can sense into that,
Yeah, we can.
It doesn't have to be a person. It might be, but it might not be. It might be also the natural world as well, as a brilliant attachment figure, I mean, incredible. So
Yeah, always there.
yeah, always.
And reliable. Thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. Really, really wonderful. Thank you for joining me.